There tends to be this consensus among my circle of friends that I look forward to bashing on things that are popular. When in reality, the truth is I actually love being proven wrong about something I have a lot of skepticism in, especially if it's something that I should in theory be looking forward to. And the most recent case of this was the revival of Mike Judge's King of the Hill, because I am a big fan of the original run of King of the Hill from the 90s to the late 2000s. I was a fan of it when I was a kid, and like many people, I grew to appreciate the show a lot more as I got older, and now it's one of my all-time favorite shows. I watch it quite often. I love the characters, I love its humor, I love its empathy, I love its portrayal of Middle America, and that's what I think is the soul of King of the Hill. Because it's a show, especially in a time where a lot of animated entertainment, even the adult stuff, is very focused on hyperactivity and gag a minute, outlandish portrayals of characters, that kind of stuff. And there are certain shows that I go to for that kind of thing, South Park being one of them. But what I go to King of the Hill for is this much more subdued, down-to-earth, slice of life portrayal of just normal people. To me, the soul of King of the Hill has always been this warm humanity. It's this call for empathy, where when it comes to the core conflict between tradition and change, and that is ultimately what King of the Hill is about. It's about these two cultural ideas clashing, and the ability to find common ground, the ability to learn from one another, the ability to maybe have some humility and change one's mind about certain things, or be proven right in certain cases. And that is what I've always loved about King of the Hill. It's not something I really realized back then when I was a kid, but the older I've grown, the more that's the main thing that I've come to realize that I love about King of the Hill, outside of it being very, very funny. Because a lot of the entertainment that I see, especially stuff that deals with Middle America, like the rednecks that we have, it tends to be dealt with in this very cynical, mocking way. And sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's okay, but more often than not, I find it to just be really mean-spirited and cliche, and it's almost like you're just going after an obvious target. You're not really doing anything all that original or funny. Because the worst thing for comedy to be, in my opinion, is predictable. So these are the reasons that I love King of the Hill. And it's because of this that I was very, very skeptical about this revival that has been in the works for a very long time, long before it was actually officially greenlit. I think my biggest worry with this King of the Hill revival was that too much time had passed. And to be honest, like I mentioned in the last video, I have not been a fan of Mike Judge's animated work for a very long time, probably since King of the Hill ended back in the late 2000s. I did not like the revivals of Beavis and Butthead. I'm not a big fan of those. I thought that Good Family show that he did was terrible. I was really surprised to find out that he show ran that with some King of the Hill writers, which was really, really surprising to me considering how unfunny that show was. And I just think there are certain creators that lose their edge and they lose their touch. And I think, unfortunately, when it comes to animation, Mike Judge was one of those people. And there were a lot of things about this new King of the Hill, just things that I saw, things that I heard about that I went, I don't know about this. Now, I will say, the thing that I thought was a good idea was that they were going to age up the characters. That time had indeed moved on between seasons 13 and 14. Because that creates new opportunities for really good character clashes. It creates opportunities for change. It creates opportunities to further explore these characters in different phases of their lives. And it brings to mind the core conflict at the heart of King of the Hill, which, like I said, tradition versus change. It's a culture clash between two people or two groups of people, and the episodes are about working those things out and learning from each other and building a better future together. It's a very warm, humanistic show. And I thought, especially with how toxic things are in the political realm and the cultural realm these days, I was worried that King of the Hill was going to take a very similar approach to its comedy in the revival, where instead of the warm empathy they portray in the original run, they were going to adapt a more cynical, mocking tone that was going to be depressing if that was what they were going to go with. This is why I began the video by saying I love when I am proven wrong, especially about something that I potentially could really like. And a King of the Hill revival is something that I always could potentially really like, because I just love that world. I love these characters deeply. So it brings me a lot of pleasure to say that I really enjoyed this revival season of King of the Hill. And what's amazing to me is that even with a new showrunner, even with a lot of new writers involved with it, they don't miss a beat when it comes to understanding what makes King of the Hill tick. They understand that humble, earnest humanity that's at the heart of King of the Hill. And it was really, really funny. There are multiple lines each episode that would make me laugh out loud. And there are plenty of moments in the show as well that I felt it. I really felt emotional. Not like tears were pouring out of my eyes, but I felt very warm and fuzzy as I was watching certain moments of the show. And I thought, wow, they really did not forget the humble, slice of life, down to earth, common humanity that King of the Hill was so good at portraying. And I'll tell you all the moment that I think I realized that the show was in good hands. And it didn't take long. It was in the very first episode. And I'm giving spoilers for the finale of the first episode. So if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend watching it. But the whole episode, the season premiere, it revolves around Hank and Peggy coming back from being in Saudi Arabia for a number of years, building their retirement nest egg. When they come back to Ireland, they are a little overwhelmed and not really sure of what to make of the big changes that have come to Ireland, both as far as things that are located in the neighborhood and just the general culture around Ireland. And Hank receives another job offer later in the episode where he and Peggy can go back to Saudi Arabia and make more money and go back to an environment that is more familiar to them, as they had gotten accustomed to Saudi Arabia for a number of years outside of Ireland. And they're considering it because Hank and Peggy are just overwhelmed when they look around a place they once lived for many years and see many, many changes. And that is very relatable. And I think what's really cool about this episode is that, and again, it speaks to the writer's understanding of King of the Hill, is that they don't mock Hank and Peggy for it. They don't say, look at these dumb rednecks, they don't understand change. I mean, when it comes to satire, when it comes to making fun of somebody, unless you are intentionally trying to take them down, you always want to poke them teasingly with like a foam sword. You never want to stab them and make them bleed. And that's what King of the Hill does with Hank and his very rigid traditionalism, where they poke at it with a foam sword. Not to make him bleed, not to make him look like an asshole, not to make him look like the bad guy, but to show, hey, this is where the comedy comes from. The comedy comes from tradition versus change. And that's what a lot of the comedy in this premiere episode originates from. But it reaches a point where Hank and Peggy just feel, I guess, disillusioned, uncomfortable, overwhelmed by a lot of the changes that have happened in Ireland while they were away, and the United States in general while they were away. So they start to seriously consider going back to Saudi Arabia. This conflict at the heart of the episode climaxes when Hank and Peggy go to the Megalomart, which is the Walmart-style megastore that's in Ireland. And as they're walking towards the store, there's this beautiful moment where they see these Girl Scouts selling cookies. And Hank walks up to them and kind of says, "Oh God, are you guys selling like all natural vegan cookies now? Are you guys charging stupid amounts of money for the box?" Just kind of behaving a little dismissively to them. And the Girl Scouts go, "No, we have plenty of cookies. These are, the typical cookies that you like." And Hank asks for a box of Samoas, which I have never heard them be called Samoas, by the way. I don't buy Girl Scout cookies very often, but when I do, I've always known them as Caramel Delights, which are the coconut shaving caramel cookies. Hank says, "Oh, do you guys have the Samoas?" And the girls go, "Yeah, we do. They're just called, Caramel Delights," which, is a little bit more, like, they feel like it's a little bit more sensitive to Samoan people. And the little girl hands Hank the box of cookies and says, "It's nice to be nice." It's a really, I'm getting like kind of emotional thinking about it right now, but it's a very, very sweet, beautiful moment because Hank and Peggy in that moment realize that even though changes are here in Arlen, some changes are a good thing. And Hank even says that this change is actually pretty good. This is okay. And it's reflective of this moment where Hank and Peggy kind of say, we're not going to go back to Saudi Arabia. We're going to stay in Arlen. We're going to embrace the change as much as we can. And we're going to try to make the best of it. And that, again, that moment to me is so emblematic of the warm, empathetic stuff that's at the heart of King of the Hill. That was a beautiful moment. And I mean, I said earlier that like nothing in this new season of King of the Hill had like tears pouring down my face. That's mostly true, but in this moment when the Girl Scout gives Hank the box of cookies and he kind of looks at it with this smile on his face and he says, I guess this change isn't so bad. I'm not gonna lie, I almost had like a tear in my eye. It was a really beautiful moment. And then there's also this cool moment where this contractor walks by, walking out of the Megalomart, and he's got one of the new tools, and he says, "Oh, if you put down my contractor code while checking out, you can get a 20% discount." And Hank goes, "Wow, that's mighty nice of you." So that's another change that he can obviously embrace. So I think I'm not going to go over the entire season. I'm not going to talk about it like in great detail because I want you all to see it. But what I want to get across to you all, the whole point of this video is that they understood the assignment and completely nailed it as far as recapturing what made King of the Hill so great. And it's significant because there have been so many nostalgia bait revivals, and I think that's also part of why I was so skeptical of this revival, because I quite frankly am sick to death of all of these nostalgia exploitation memberberry revivals that are coming out, and I'm so done with it. I'm sick of it. I was sick of it many years ago, and I'm especially sick of it today. And I did not want to see my beloved King of the Hill dragged through the mud of the typical revival crap where they just have no idea of these characters, no understanding, there's no talent behind the writing. They make a mockery of some of the characters in certain shows. But this is the very rare revival to me that is completely 100% faithful to the spirit of the show. And for the most part, I feel maintains the quality that the original run had. Simply because it recaptures the soul of what made the original run so special. This new King of the Hill season might be the best TV revival I've seen in my lifetime. I would have to think about it a little more, that's why I say might. But if not the best, it's absolutely one of the best revivals I've seen in my lifetime. Out of all of these shows that have come back out of, being dormant for so many years, this is the rare one that just steps back up to the plate and clearly has not missed a beat whatsoever as far as swinging for the fences and nailing home runs. But all in all, I highly recommend this new season of King of the Hill. It's very faithful, it's very funny, and I enjoyed it a lot. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.